Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So two reminders from previous sessions. One was Ibn Sina's statement that people are surprised when iron particles are attracted to iron. But then what is more amazing than that is how our physical body moves. Why aren't they amazed by that? That is much more of interest to us. Why? Because if you remember in Imam Khomeini's letter too, when he said, see what Ibn Sina says, because Ibn Sina has spoken a lot about matter, material realm. Matter can't move. Matter is matter. By its very nature, it can't move. The brain is physical. The central nervous system is physical. Physical things by itself, by its very nature, something has to move it. Now don't say, for example, yes, well, there may be neurons firing at it and the electrical pulse. Well, that's physical too. The neurons are physical. Then go one step back, something exiting the neurons, that is physical. But it has to stop somewhere. But matter alone, the story can't end with matter alone. Whatever is physical, yes, you have to think beyond. That was one story. The other narrative was that this me, so far we've kept on saying me, and everything is attributed to the me. But a very good question was raised at the end of lesson 29, and that is that in the first 4 months, look at the incredible things that the soul has shapen of its embryo. You know, the heart, everything, the arteries, the veins, everything. So why do we now, if that was a me from day one, why is the me now helpless when they want to make a simple building, when they want to weave a carpet? So then from me, we now say, okay, maybe we were too early to keep referring it to me. Let's say it nafs, the soul for now. Yes, from day one there was a soul, right now there's a soul. And yes, there is a unity between these. It's all evolved. This is that. But the soul from day one, in the early months, something's happened to it somewhere down the line which enables us to then say me. Now that we're entering this territory now, that what has happened, that now from soul we can say me. Yes, from day one there was a soul, it was an individual soul, the identity was singular. Right now too, my individuality, my identity is all one. And this one soul has evolved to the soul I have today. But the me has come somewhere after a period of time, it's arisen. And this me, when it wants to now build a building, it can't, it needs a teacher. So there wasn't a me in the creation of all those arteries and the heart, the limbs, the organs, all those incredible things. The me wasn't present then. Now we have to see that in this session, inshallah, we'll go through a number of lessons and we'll reach our first milestone. Inshallah, after this session, there's a milestone we would have passed. All these lessons were preliminary to that. What is matter? Although they still talk on matter. But all these preliminary points is leading us now to this direction. Okay, so lesson number 30. He says, okay, as usual, he first summarizes one or two sentences the previous session. He says, man is one reality, or I am one reality. And right now we've become a bit suspicious because of that last lesson's question. Let's not say me now. Let's go back to soul. It's easier. And say, okay, I'm one reality, and that reality is my nafs, my soul. And this nafs is the source of generation of the body, is the source of animation of the body, even from day one. Okay? After fertilization, there's a power built. It's all material, but it's building different parts. Day after day, it's always building upon something. That force which is building everything, it's material for now. And we say it's the soul. It's the source of generating different functions, different parts of the embryo from day 2, day 3, day 4. Things keep on being added, becomes bigger and bigger. It's evolving. And this nafs has the power to acquire all forms of knowledge. Ilm. Now look, we're entering certain territories here. Because knowledge, they only spoke about on lesson 1. He said it's the criterion for nobility. Even amongst, animals are higher than plants, plants higher than stones, humans higher than animals. Even between humans, which one is more nobility? That one which has more knowledge than different kinds of knowledge. We went through it in lesson 1. Now he's saying the nafs has the power to acquire all forms of knowledge. This knowledge, it seems to be an important word here. Since lesson 1, we haven't talked about knowledge to much depth. Matter, he's talked about matter, Ibn Sina. Remember Imam Khomeini's letter. Also read Mullah Sadra. By reading Mullah Sadra, you'll know what is the reality of knowledge. Ilm. And this nafs has the power to acquire all forms of knowledge, but it's journeying, the nafs moves from deficiency to perfection, deficiency to perfection. And attaining to perfection needs an exiter. It's exiting always from a state of potentiality to actuality. Potentiality, so it needs an exiter. That much we've covered. So an exiter must exist for this movement to become realized. Movement of the soul in learning knowledge, for example. When they want to build a building or weave a carpet or any other form of knowledge. And it's evident if the exiter, that cause of the movement, lacks perfection, it's impossible for it to grant perfection to that moving entity. It won't have the role of perfecting. So something is a moving entity. It's moving from deficiency to perfection. Here now we're saying it's the soul. We're giving the example of the soul. This soul is moving from deficiency to perfection continuously. One of those perfections is knowledge. It needs an exiter. That exiter has to exit the soul from its state of deficiency to perfection, from its state of potentially having ilm to its state of actually having ilm. The exiter, therefore, has to have that perfection of knowledge if it wants to exit the soul from a state of deficiency to perfection. All these are rational concepts here. It's not deep philosophy or anything. It's basic thinking, exercising the mind a bit. And the reason is because the lacker, one who lacks, doesn't have, absent, the lacker of any X attribute can't bestow X to another entity. If a teacher doesn't know mathematics, they can't teach mathematics to someone else. A very basic principle. So now we want to ask another question. Why can't a given Z moving entity move itself in order to get from deficiency to perfection? Why can't the moving entity, like the soul, can't you say this me, the soul, it moves itself from deficiency to perfection? And that would mean that Z moving entity is its own exiter, in effect. When you want to say, why can't the soul move itself from deficiency to perfection? In effect, you're saying this Z moving entity is its own exiter. And we said the exiter must have that perfection to make the soul move from deficiency to perfection. And now you're saying the soul be its own exiter? That means the soul has that perfection. But you're saying the soul is moving, so it doesn't have the perfection. That's a contradiction. You see? So the soul can't be its own exiter. The exiter must have the perfection of that thing which it wants to grant perfection to. The exiter must already have it. How can the soul be its own exiter? It means it both has that perfection and it doesn't have the perfection because it's moving towards it. It has and it doesn't have. That's a contradiction. That should be straightforward. Anyone have an issue there? No? And so all the perfections which are the existential effects of the soul, all the perfections which are existential manifestations of the soul in knowledge, all these libraries that we have, inventions, all these things that we see, all the power manifestations we see, is based on knowledge too. This knowledge, is it existing or not? Yes, it must come from somewhere. The soul is manifesting all this knowledge. And we're all given these manifestations of knowledge, were all given to the soul by the exiter. Okay, not the soul itself. So the soul starts by lacking knowledge to whatever degree, and then it's over time granted knowledge by an exiter who has all those perfections. Okay, now this is getting rather exciting now. So one thing is the fact that the exiter has to have all these perfections in order for it to move the soul. That's one thing. And the soul, just look at around our surroundings, all the things that humans are doing. What's the level of the perfection of knowledge we see around us? All these inventions, all these libraries, all these works in different domains. It's all knowledge. And it all came from the soul. But the soul couldn't do it itself. It needs an exiter. Now in the first 4 months, the exiter led to the growth of the embryo. But there was no me. There was no me then. Then all of a sudden, at around 4 months, we now say there's a me. What is happening from this 4 months onwards? Something has been added. What is it? So the exiter must have all those perfections of the moving soul. And in addition to the exiter having all the perfections of the soul is moving. Eventually there's a me. This we call the soul me. What's added? That's a question we're going to answer in this session. And we said that the exiter must have all the perfections that it wants to bestow upon any moving entity. Otherwise, it won't move. But there's another condition too of the exiter. That the exeter must be in total control of that thing too. Now that's the first time he's raising this. Because sometimes I may have all the perfections as a mathematics teacher. And that moving soul wants to move, learning knowledge, learning mathematics. Okay, if I want to be its teacher, yes, I must have that perfection for them to learn mathematics and therefore for their soul to grow. But I may have all the knowledge of mathematics, but be mutually exclusive from that individual. I'm not an exeter then. So the exeter, in addition to having all the perfections, there must be a relationship between the exeter and that moving entity. And the relationship can't be mutually exclusive from one another. It's a bit more closer. He touches this point, he stops, we'll come to it later. But have that in mind. Just merely having the perfections will not suffice in order to exit that moving entity from deficiency to perfection. Okay, so now he says it's time to take a break and go through. Let's summarize these principles. We're going at a fast rate. Principle number 26. The essence which we label as I has many names. Most popular technically is soul, rational soul, intellect, psyche, spirit. Principle number 27. The body is a subtle physical manifestation of the soul, the lowest that is attributed to me. 28. The corpse, which is something physical, is deemed a body when the soul is controlling it, when the soul is encompassing it and exerts its existential effects over it. But when the soul is cut off from that body, it's not called a body, it's called a corpse now, and it will decompose. So when there's a relation between the soul and that physical thing, we will call it a body, because the body is moving. But when the connection has been cut, that's not a body anymore. We call it a corpse. It's just a physical thing and it can't move. 29. At every moment in its kingdom of existence, the soul has numerous dimensions, and none of these dimensions prevent the function of another. For example, seeing and hearing does not prevent one to digest or circulate blood. Number 30. Amongst all the existents that have or show knowledge, intelligence, insight, man is superior because the nature of its essence is greater than the essence of other creatures like animals, plants. Civilization comes from something. It comes from man, it comes from his soul, his essence. Animals don't have a civilization as such. Man's essence is greater. 31. The relationship between the faculties of the soul to the soul is like the branches, leaves and fruits of a tree to the tree. 32. The musawwara, shaping faculty by itself, the physical faculty itself, does not shapen because it has no independence. It's not in possession of those shapes. Remember something? That faculty which shapes the embryo. The faculty itself, that physical entity itself, is not shaping that embryo because it doesn't have all the shapes within it. It's something material. So don't say that is the exeter, which leads to the creation of the embryo with its incredible arteries, heart, organs, limbs, and so on and so forth. And 33, that which lacks a given X can't grant X to another. The grantor of Kamal and perfection must itself possess that perfection. Okay, so that's lesson 30. Lesson 31. He says movement has been discussed. And now we're discussing the movement of the soul from deficiency to perfection. Then he starts off with a statement. It's a very rational statement. Everyone has to agree with it. He says man the reality of which is its soul, man never moves towards something that is in all aspects unknown to man. If something is totally unknown to me, I will never move towards it. It's impossible. It's a very rational principle. i.e., man never seeks absolute unknowns. Something which is an unknown in absolute terms. Sometimes something is partially unknown, but you have some acquaintance with it. Yes, you'll go towards it. But something which is absolutely unknown, man doesn't seek it. Rather, man goes after and seeks something in which there exists a degree of acquaintance or awareness, and also until the object or objective is not known, man will not set forward to the sort, that which is seeking. And this applies with animals too. And this too is a principle, Ayatollah Hassan says, we have to add this to the list. That man does not move towards that which is unknown to him in the absolute sense. So, a question arises, but how does this indefinite idea of something arise in man for him to move forwards in the first place? There must be something, albeit not definite or definitive, it's not totally known to one. There must be something which one becomes acquainted with and then one seeks it. The question is, how does this something arise in man? Is it an inspiration which happened, an incident, someone's words, a video, a book, the fitra, a divine breeze? So he says, let's get the questions rolling again. What is it which makes one move then? Because we know man doesn't move towards something which is absolutely unknown to him. But sometimes he may know something, have an acquaintance of something. How did that happen? How did that arise? Through what means? Question. The seeker who wants to now acquire perfection, the soul who wants to now acquire knowledge. This is the example he's playing around with for now. This seeker, what is he? What is it? The seeker who wants to acquire perfection, for example, knowledge, what is it? Now you may say, me, okay, no problem. The seeker is me. We accept that in concise terms, we still haven't opened that up. Secondly, the grantor of perfection, in this example, the grantor of knowledge. Who or what is that? And the answer is there, that we haven't opened up yet. In lesson 1, we've said a few things, but still, we're far from understanding the exiter. That the grantor, we have some time left. But they are the exiter. And that exiter must have, this much we've understood, that the exiter must have that knowledge which I'm seeking, so it can grant it to me. But anything else about the exiter at this stage, I don't know. I can't tell you. Another question, what is the manner of giving and receiving this knowledge? And how does the receiver of the knowledge undergo development? If the soul is going to receive this knowledge, how does it receive it? And as a result, how does it, you're saying, moves, develops from deficiency to perfectioncy? Can you explain what does development of the soul mean? These are all questions. Another question, must there exist in this whole realm of existence a knowledge which is self-subsistent, a knowledge which is independent, not dependent on anything, knowledge? So that on learning knowledge, on learning, acquiring ilm, one moves towards such an entity. Must there be such a knowledge? Or mustn't there be such an entity? That's a very important question. Have this at the back of your mind for now. The soul is moving, deficiency to perfection. The example he's given is knowledge. Why has he given this knowledge example? It's related to that last question in lesson number 29. He says, okay, now this knowledge, does there have to be a self-subsistent? The Arabic being qayyum. Must there be a self-subsistent, independent knowledge for me, who is learning it, to move towards that? Does there have to be one? That's a question. Then he says, however much we become more learned and progress more with respect to knowledge, and learn more and more, acquire more and more knowledge, mustn't there be a store of knowledge, a source to extract from when you're learning more and more? Must there be a source which you keep on getting? And however much we learn more, do we get closer to the source? Not closer as a physical closeness, but as a state of becoming similar or in synchronicity with that knowledge. Oh, they're becoming very difficult questions now. And it's all because of the term knowledge. Ilm, what is this? Must there be a source of knowledge? When I get closer and closer, learn more and more of it, I get closer and closer. Not physical closeness, but being more and more knowledge-like. Being the soul, being synchronous with knowledge. He says, this lesson that we've just gone through contained many depths and secrets. This one lesson. But he hasn't opened it up. And needs, therefore, more discussion and argumentation. In lesson 32, he starts, again, giving a summary of the previous lesson. Man is never after an absolute unknown. So, then, if he's going towards something, in this case it's knowledge, there must have been an acquaintance he or she had with knowledge. If you see someone is going towards knowledge, that knowledge couldn't have been an absolute unknown, because we said man doesn't move towards that which is an absolute unknown to them. It's impossible. And however much perfection man finds and acquires, we said they become closer to a reality. In this case, the reality of knowledge, and they become similar to it, and they become more synchronous with that reality. Although this hasn't been opened up yet, it hasn't been proven. Now, the question now he wants to raise is, how does man reach, when he has a rough idea of something he wants to reach, he must have some idea, otherwise he wouldn't move towards it. Then how does he reach it, the definitive perfection? So right now he knows in general terms, indefinitely, of what he wants to acquire. So how does he finally get that perfection of whatever it is they're looking for? He gives an example first. He says, for example, an accountant or a shopkeeper. A shopkeeper has done transactions with someone else. Many transactions during the year. And he wants to know whether, at the end, he's a debtor or is he indebted. He has some rough idea. That's why he's going to find out. So he goes through the books which he's already acquired through the year. He goes through the books, and at the end, after going through the books, he definitively comes to an answer, yes, no, I am indebted. Or he may come to the response that, no, I am a debtor. They are indebted to me. So look, in the beginning he had some idea. He went to self-evident things that he knew were definite knowns, and he scrambled through them, perused through them, and he came with an answer. So we say he started with ijmali, indefinite knowledge. Made him move though. It wasn't a total unknown. And then he reached his answer. And that was it's an example to get us going. So, that which one was seeking in the beginning, this shopkeeper, is the same thing as that which he ended up at the end. No, that's a code. The thing he was searching for in the beginning, indefinitely, and that which he definitively found the answer to at the end, is the same reality. But in the beginning, it was in the ijmali sense, indefinite sense, but at the end it was definitively attained to. But the reality was one in real terms. For them, they were acquainted to some degree, then they got to the bottom of it. So, the sought one, sought, that which is we were seeking, the sought one, he says, huwa al-awwalu wal-akhir, was the first and the last. But the first, it was in indefinite terms, the last was in definitive terms. Then he says, this function of man, the movement of the soul, moves, let's say in relation to knowledge, it moves first in an indefinite sense, but there's some acquaintance with knowledge, makes them move, and then they reach that and attain to that perfection of that knowledge. And this process itself of moving of the soul in relation to knowledge, from deficiency to perfection, let's call it a name, and the name is given deliberation, thinking. It's like in geometry, you want to prove the angles of a triangle is 180 degrees. Well, you have some acquaintance with what a triangle is, what an angle is, what 180 is. And then with that acquaintance, you move forward to prove it with the other knowns that you had. And then finally you come to prove definitively, yes, the angles of a triangle is 180, I've proved it. See, that's a movement of the soul in knowledge. The soul is moving from deficiency to perfection. Now, the more knowledge we learn, the more like and the more synchronous we become with the reality of knowledge. But still we have to ask ourselves, this reality of knowledge, does it have to be a self-subsistent, independent knowledge, or could it be a knowledge which is dependent on something else? That's a question. It deserves respect. Is it, if it's self-subsistent, independent, it would be infinite. Does the reality of knowledge have to be infinite? And then what does it mean for us to acquire more and more knowledge? Then you say, by acquiring more and more knowledge, the attribute of knowledge, you become more and more like knowledge. You become synchronous with knowledge. This knowledge, does it have to be self-subsistent? Or can it be something which is dependent on something else? It seems that it has to be an independent source of knowledge. Knowledge. And furthermore, the more that our knowledge increases, the more the existential manifestations arise within us. The more knowledge that we have, the more we write, the more we can make buildings, the more we can weave carpets, do this, do that, so many things, manifest because of our increasing in knowledge. These are manifestations of the knowledge that one has acquired, which animals don't have like us. That seems to be a point here. So maybe at that 4-month period where we said the me starts, the I starts, maybe knowledge started there, albeit rudimentary, albeit very basic knowledge. But here the fetus now has an awareness of itself. has acquired knowledge, but very simple, rudimentary. So what's different from its previous growth? Oh, sorry, before it was, everything was physical. You can't say knowledge is physical. That's all. Now we're dealing with a new entity here, that you call me. The knowledge that this me has, which seems to start at a given point, for everyone it may be different. The Sharia has now said four lunar months because it's illegal. In law, you have to give certain definitive guidelines and boundaries. But now this me, it has knowledge. And this knowledge now moves from deficiency to perfection, moment to moment, from 4 lunar months in the womb onwards. But this knowledge is not physical. And this is why the me arises. This is why ilm is important. Knowledge, you can't now say it's physical. There's a problem by saying that, and he's going to give all the proofs later. So now we're dealing with a phenomenon. It's knowledge. And all these manifestations comes from this. And sometimes people do extraordinary things. They can teletransport, or they can walk on water, or all these different things. Whatever it is, it's from knowledge. If 500 years ago you said people can go on the moon, when Galileo had, or before Galileo, when they had found certain things or planets and said, this is the moon, this is this is that. What if someone would say, we're going to go on the moon soon? He would say, no, of course you can't. All these are relative. But with knowledge, they went on the moon. Unless you're one of the conspiracy theorists and believe no one went on the moon. It was, yes. With knowledge, you can do many things. But at a given period of time, say, oh no, of course you can't do that. It's impossible. But over time, with the evolution of knowledge, you learning more and more, deficiency to perfection, eventually there's no limit to knowledge. It seems to always be growing. If it's always growing and there's no limit, so there seems that knowledge itself has to be self-subsistent, has to be an infinite reality. If it keeps going as it has, as far as history recalls from the beginning to now, keeps on adding, and it seems it will just keep on going. There's no signs that there's an end to knowledge. So that thing we are going towards, and we're acquainted with it to some degree, it seems to be self-subsistent and independent. And right now we're going to just give it one simple name: ilm, knowledge. And the more we acquire it, the more we are knowledge-like. We are more synchronous with what the reality of knowledge is. What is the reality of knowledge? We have to now enter that. We've told you what matter is, and we're going to tell you more about matter. But what is knowledge? So how did the embryo reach such a status? How did the embryo attain perfection from a state of deficiency? How did the embryo become aware of all these secrets and sources of knowledge and manifestations of knowledge? There must be an exeter which exited the embryo from a state of deficiency to potentiality to actuality, deficiency to perfection, moment to moment. That exeter must have had all these perfections in order to bestow it upon the embryo. And this exeter is making this fetus, making the fetus's transition from potentiality to actuality, from that ijmali, indefinite knowledge to definitive knowledge. It's making it work. Okay, now we finished lesson number 32. Now we come to lesson number 33, which is the milestone. Although now you should be aware of it, but I thought let's at least cover this with your permission. I know time may be limited, but if I just finish this one. So it says, for every moving entity from deficiency to perfection, there has to be an exeter. The exeter must have that perfection, the one it wants to bestow. And we said that's not enough. To be a grantor, one, in addition to having that perfection, there must be a relationship with that thing too, that it's in control. Otherwise, if it has the perfection but is mutually exclusive to that thing, then what kind of exeter would it be? There must be a relationship that it does grant it that movement from deficiency to perfection. So the exeter must also encompass and conquer over the moving entity from deficiency to perfection. And that we'll speak about later. And thus be related to that moving entity, not mutually exclusive, in such a manner that it can shift the moving entity from deficiency to perfection in actual terms, whilst the deficient moving entity must submit to the exeter in order to attain to perfection. Because if they were mutually exclusive, A and B, how can A make B move from deficiency to perfection when it's not in control of it, it's not encompassing it? There must be some control. Otherwise, if they're mutually exclusive, then there's no guarantee it can make this move from deficiency to perfection. That was a summary of the last session. He says here now, knowledge, ilm, exists. It's not non-existence. That's a given. And in lesson 1 we said, maximum manifestations of us emanate from our knowledge. Even our power emanates from our knowledge. And from power, look at how many manifestations come from our power, but our power emanates from our knowledge. He made the ultimate criterion knowledge, ilm, which differentiates between humans and animals, and even between humans. And these manifestations, they can't emanate from non-existence, so it has to emanate from something. We also said ilm, knowledge, was a criterion for nobility. One is more noble than the other when they have more knowledge and they manifest more from it. Something which is Adam, non-existent, can't grant nobility. Now, a question. One who leads to so many manifestations of knowledge, like inventions, revelations, job quality, discoveries, all these things which emanate, do they have... So one who leads to all these manifestations of knowledge, like discoveries and inventions, do they have the knowledge within them? We say yes. They have that knowledge that they're manifesting in books or in discoveries or inventions or other things. There's no problem there. And this me who has knowledge and is learning more and more and then manifesting it, is moving, learning more and more, leading to more and more manifestations. And therefore, the more manifestations that come out of it, the more nobility is granted to it. Therefore, this question arises. Where exactly is the container of knowledge? Who is containing this knowledge? Knowledge is the contained. You've talked about knowledge. I agree. Whatever you said about knowledge, I agree. But now tell me the container. Is it in a limb? Is it in a physical limb, part of the body? Like the stomach is a container for food? Is knowledge also in a container? Like food is in a container, the stomach? Is knowledge something similar to that? He says, no, it seems not. He'll prove it later, but for now, with very basic aqli reasoning, exercising. He says, no, it seems not. It's not like that. He says, why? He says, if the container, which is, zarf in Farsi or in Arabic, zarf in Swahili, I'm not sure, maybe chambo. I was looking up maybe chambo, the container. It can be any kind of container. Container, the zarf. If the container of knowledge is like the container of food, i.e. it's physical, then, for example, it's in an organ or a limb of the body, its affording of space will be limited. When that limb or that body wants to give, receive and contain that knowledge, the space of that limb or organ may become limited. Like a stomach and food. The stomach, when it's always filled with food, eventually there's no more space afforded to it. It's going to become limited. For example, when eating food, they will no longer have space for more food. Now, even if it's the best food, say, no, I can't have anything. My container of food is full up now. Even if you give them the most delicious food, they say, I can't. But this is not the case with knowledge. One will never say, after learning something, that my container of knowledge is full. Rather, they will want more knowledge. Look, from day one, when we started this, look how much knowledge you had. Maybe one of two of you said, what is he saying? Next time you come, we can start something else now. But now look, you've learned more and more. Now you want more and more. So when you're learning something, you don't say, my container is full. Rather, you would want more and more. Then you would say, I want something deeper. Give me deeper. Give me harder materials of this knowledge. Because it's, I need it. I'm thirsty for it. Otherwise, I'm going to die. And it will be a pleasure for you to receive it too. But that food, even if it's the best food, you say, no, I'm full. And then he says, and the first time he brings the hadith, after 33 sessions of aqli reasoning, and in the whole book there's only 2 or 3 hadith. He brings the hadith and say, just in case some of you are still not on the same wavelength as us, and you're lacking behind, let me give you a hadith from Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajal fajr. I think this was the first salawat after the 7 sessions. Kullu wi'a'in yadhiqu bima ju'ila fi illa wi'a al-ilm fa innahu yattasi'u bih. A paraphrase translation, every container, as a result of that which is assigned in it, becomes restricted, limited, except for the container of knowledge, which expands when knowledge is assigned in it. Look, expands, let alone being restricted. This container of knowledge. Now, what is knowledge? The stuff that it's made out of. What is it? Then what is containing it? Then this container is expanding. I think we have to really pontificate here. So I learn. When I say I learn, it's attributed to me. But is it attributed to a physical part of me? A physical body? A physical limb? Organ? He says, look, man has 2 kinds of foods. And each of these 2 kinds of foods, one is bread, one is knowledge. Each of these has its own specific container. The bread is stomach, knowledge is difficult to say it's physical for now. So he says, the container of knowledge, let's say it's me for now. And this me we've established before, it's other than the body. But what is it? We don't know yet. But it's other than the body. Each food does its own duty and does not execute the function of the other food. What bread does, knowledge can't do it. What knowledge does, bread can't do it. For example, a hungry person doesn't become satiated with knowledge. They're hungry, they want to eat something. If they go and read a book, the hunger won't go away. And the seeker of knowledge doesn't learn and acquire more and more knowledge if they go and have some chocolates, for example. So it's a difference here. There are two foods, and these two, the stuff these two are made out of are different. The stuff, the actual stuff it's made, is different. Bread, knowledge. They're not synchronous with one another. One is material, the other is other than material. And therefore, their containers too are not synchronous with one another. One is the physical body, the container of food. But since we know physical food and knowledge, they're not synchronous with one another, the containers of these two foods should also, they can't be synchronous with one another. This we have to explore more, inshallah, tomorrow. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala tahirin.